Ukraine puts the blame squarely on Russia for this latest crisis, accusing them of invading their territory and backing gunmen who now control large areas of Donetsk and Luhansk. Kiev says Moscow wants to build a land corridor that connects the Russian mainland with the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia seized from Ukraine in March. Now, with falling oil prices and Russia's economy teetering on collapse, some wonder if Vladimir Putin will use this latest development to back down or venture deeper into Ukrainian territory. In eastern Ukraine, a fragile ceasefire is supposed to stop the bloodshed. That hasn't happened yet. For those living on the front lines, the past 9 months have been a harrowing ordeal.
I'm on the phone constantly, connecting refugees with potential families who want to help.
Tamara Dudnik is from the eastern city of Slavyansk. When pro-Russian rebels invaded this part of the country in April, she and her husband, prominent Ukrainian pastor Peter Dudnik, risked their lives to help those caught in the conflict.
It started out very simply. Someone called my cell and asked if we could help get them out of a city that was under fire from rebels. We made some calls and got them out. Word spread out about what we did, and soon people were calling us from all over the region.
Every week now since that first phone call back in April, the Dudniks, with the help of CBN's Orphans Promise and several Ukrainian churches, helped hundreds of families escape from rebel-held territories in the east.
We are a lifeline for families. Some of them call us saying, "Save us, save us."
For several months now, Orphans Promise has been running a hotline connecting a stream of refugees coming out of the war zone here in the east and the Crimean Peninsula, with families and churches willing to help.
Getting them out of the conflict zone was one thing, but then we had to find places for them to stay. We had to take care of their health needs, feed them, and get them warm clothes for the winter.
More than 1 million people fled eastern Ukraine.
Most of them left their homes with little more than the clothes on their backs. They lost everything. They have nothing.
So for now, as winter sets in, the conflict, which has internally displaced more than 500,000 people, shows no sign of ending anytime soon. George Thomas, CBN News.
Thanks, George. Well, joining us now with more is General Wesley Clark. He's former NATO Supreme Allied Commander in Europe during the Kosovo crisis. He recently visited Ukraine and met with key leaders in the government. And General Clark, what do you learn when you're on the ground? Is Putin trying to stir up something to have a wider war?
Well, he's definitely putting the framework in place to use military power again. I was over there in early November, Pat, and I've been in constant touch with the Ukrainians. This was my 5th trip since March. And it's very clear that all of this is attributable to Russia. Russia's military has directly intervened. There were Russian troops on the ground, Russian artillery, Russian rocket launchers inside eastern Ukraine. They're using very high technology, and he's building up his forces. Now, whether he uses those forces or not, that remains to be seen. He's got a lot of other problems, and I think Putin must have been surprised that the Ukrainians were so determined to resist the Russian attack.
What is the playbook? In other words, he has got agent provocateurs, as the French would say, inside of Ukraine who are claiming, well, we're being persecuted, and therefore that'll give Putin an excuse to come in militarily. Is that the idea?
That's what he did. He actually put his special forces in, and they seized the buildings in Luhansk and Donetsk, and then he put his agents in there to round up people who were disaffected. They paid them to fight. They brought in some thugs from inside Russia. Of course, you can't tell the difference from the outside. They used the Western news media. They kept saying alleged, alleged. There was nothing alleged about it. It was absolutely true. And when the Ukrainians tried to regain their territory in late August, Russia intervened massively. Maybe 4,000 Ukrainian soldiers and volunteers were killed, about the same number of Russians. Modern weaponry was used, and some illegal weaponry was used by the Russians. And then the Russian maneuver forces were pulled back. Fighting continued, and now the Russian maneuver forces and artillery are starting to come back in, and there's a big buildup around the periphery. So Putin, we don't know what his objectives are. We don't know what his ultimate ambitions are. He's obviously wrestling with some crises now that he's brought on Russia himself, and the fall in the price of oil is certainly hurting him. But he has military means, he has economic means, and he has political means to try to hurt Ukraine. Obviously, the Ukrainians know it now. They're on the alert. These agent provocateurs are having trouble moving deeper into Ukraine because the Ukrainians are alert to it.
Well, you know, this economic crisis with the ruble going from about 32 to the dollar now to about 72 to the dollar, and it looks like a collapse in the economy. They're selling off their reserves. Would a war not be the thing to divert the people's attention away from the economic crisis?
Pat, it could very well go that way. You know, it's always easy for us in the West to believe that because we didn't use military force, he won't respond with military force. But if you go back to the 1930s and 40s when we were having trouble with Japan, we cut off their oil and scrap steel. Japan responded with Pearl Harbor. So the fact that we're not using military means and it's purely an economic struggle for Putin doesn't mean he won't try something militarily.
What should we do right now? I thought that the United States should have sent some supplies, some military equipment in to help the Ukrainians. Are we doing anything to help them that's worthy of the name?
Well, of course, the most important help is the political support and reassurance we've given the government. We're also preparing economic assistance. We've arranged for them to keep their energy supplies. We've got a lot more economic assistance to go. Putin could win any number of ways, but it's important that we close off his military options. So Ukraine's stabilized the fighting front right now. They're doing their best to produce. They've got a pretty modern industrial establishment, but for 20 years it's been producing odd items for Russia, but hasn't delivered those items and delivered modern technology to its own forces. So I'd like to see us support those forces. There's a bill that's gone through Congress. I'm told the White House is looking at signing it. It would provide more assistance to Ukraine, but they need the ability to counter the Russian threat. If we're going to make diplomacy and economic development work and hold off this crisis in Europe that Putin's bringing, Putin has to be made to understand that he doesn't have military options. That's the key.
If you were a betting person, what kind of odds would you give on the survival of the Ukraine in this crisis?
Oh, I'd say it's going to survive because, and I think this is what's got Putin stymied at this point. You know, Pat, there was a discussion in Europe that maybe in March he'd actually called Poland and said secretly, hey, let's split up Ukraine. You can have the western end of it. I'll take the rest of it. And of course, the Poles didn't bite on that. I think he thought he could swallow Ukraine. And I think he understands now there's 49 million people there, and at least 40 million of them, or 45 million of them, don't want to be part of Russia. And the more he's pushed, the more they want to come to the West. They want democracy. They want economic development. They want freedom. They want what they see Poland and other NATO members having. And so, on the one hand, it's a great reaffirmation of our system of government, our way of life, our values. On the other hand, it poses risks because Russia may come after us. But I think the course of the last 9 months has established pretty clearly that Ukraine is going to be part of the West. It is going to survive, and the governments of Western Europe and the United States government are going to do whatever it takes to help Ukraine survive.
Well, that's a wonderful statement. Thank you, General Clark. We appreciate you being with us on the 700 Club.
Thank you, Pat. Great to be with you.